So following that wonderful discussion with Secretary DeVos and Corey, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the long journey that we've seen in places like Arizona to realize school choice. I had the chance to work out in Arizona, as Avik mentioned, about 20 years ago, and there have been people who have been working on this issue for decades. It struck me that next year will mark the 30th anniversary of Arizona passing one of the country's first charter school laws. In 1997, there was a tuition tax credit program that was established. Along the way, there were voucher programs and ultimately an ESA in 2011. But it was still a work in progress when you became governor at the beginning of your term. What was your outlook on school choice and education when you entered office?
Sure. So let me begin by just saying thanks so much, Avik and Dan. I'm really honored with this award. It's great to be here in D.C. and be able to brag on some of the things that we were able to get done. But I think you can see by just some of the conversations we've already had, this is a team sport. And, you know, Betsy and Dick DeVos had been toiling in the fields of educational freedom for decades before it was ever cool. Corey DeAngelis would parachute into Arizona and persuade people and sometimes crack skulls to open minds along the way. But this is, I come from the private sector. My company was Cold Stone Creamery, the ice cream business. And this idea of educational savings accounts, of school choice, was part of what animated my run for governor. I just thought it made a lot of sense. And I learned a lot along the way, not only about campaigning and policy, but also the history of this cause. And in 1994, we opened up the first charter schools in Arizona. Arizona is the #1 state in the nation for charter schools. We have 525 charter schools. They house over 220,000 kids. This is over 20% of our public school kids. And if you take those 20%, that's the #1 state in the nation for achievement in math, reading, and science. And those schools of choice improved our public schools. That competition and that benefit to try to either keep kids in the seat or improve the program had improved the system across the board. So this idea of taking the next step of educational savings account is something I wanted to do. Very difficult to do at that time. Took all of 8 years to get it done. I was blessed with a great team when I was in office, from my chief to my policy advisors. And this was in our 8th year. I was on my 3rd chief of staff. And I went home and I told my wife that I felt like I was torturing my team. Because on Sunday night, I had a good relationship with the legislature, but over the course of 8 years, relationships get a little threadbare. And I would use the office to bring people up to have conversations, and I'd use Sunday nights to call legislators that I needed something for the next week. And it was like the song from the musical Hamilton. I mean, we just didn't have the votes. I had some legislators that for whatever reason said, we're not voting for this. So persistence and determination really paid off. The politics of that final session, there were some things that went a different way, and we had this opening. But Corey invoked Milton Friedman, and there's another Friedman quote that I want to paraphrase. And it says, in a crisis, people will look for the ideas that are lying around. This idea of educational savings accounts was lying around. We had passed it in 2017 in a much smaller sphere. They referred it to the ballot, and we were slaughtered in the public square, lost 65 to 35. Think about the crisis of COVID. People saw what their kids were being taught and not taught, the lack of rigor. We passed it universally in that final session. They tried to refer it to the people, and the people said, no, we're going to give it a chance. Today we have 70,000 families, soon to be 100,000 families, and I pointed out some of the champions that helped bring this to the governor's office. We also have Ben Toma here, the Arizona Speaker of the House.
Please.
Without Speaker Toma's leadership, it would have never gotten to my desk. So a lot of gratitude tonight.
Can you talk about some of the opposition that you faced? You mentioned the teachers' unions. They tried to push a signature collection effort after the bill passed. My understanding is you had some strategies to defend against that maneuver. How did you marshal the support you had in the community to try and overcome that political opposition?
Well, those of you that are my age or older will remember the name Roger Bannister. And Roger Bannister was the first human to break the 4-minute mile. A lot of people said it was impossible to do. No man or woman could run a mile in 4 minutes. Well, since Roger Bannister's done that, thousands of people have broken the 4-minute mile since. And I think that was a lot of the mindset around educational school choice. It just seemed a little bit too scary. We had some Republican legislators that really got weak-kneed. At the state level, every state, not just Arizona, every single state in the nation, their budget is 50% plus on K-12 education. That makes K-12 spending a bigger resource at the state level than entitlements or national defense or anything else is at the federal level. So the teachers' unions really get involved. So in addition to checking under the car and having DPS check under the car every morning of that last year, we had to engage people personally to get this done. And then we have an anomaly in our Constitution in Arizona that the founders were against, and that's the initiative and referendum, where it can go out to the people. And because the teachers and education is so well organized, they were able to beat us the last time, but this time we had the parents on our side. And they were going outside, standing next to the signature gatherers with refuse to sign signs. And do you know what you're signing? Do you know what that's about? This is about education and letting parents have stewardship over their own dollars and send their kids wherever they want. So they weren't even able to get the signatures to put it to the ballot. And I give a lot of the credit to the parents that were already receiving the ESAs, the parents that were going to be the beneficiaries of the ESAs. And I think this is the single most important thing we can do at the state level. I think not only can we reform K-12 education with doing this, but we can renew our communities because you're getting parents back together. There's a lot of discussion about what's happening in our public schools, about the culture wars and the curriculum and the books at the library level. These are all discussions that are worth having, but the way to solve it is through school choice. Make the parent the customer and the client. Let them vote with their feet, and all of a sudden, these administrators and bureaucrats will start listening a little closer.
Earlier, Corey mentioned that 70,000 students are now benefiting from Arizona's ESA program. And even beyond that, this program's available to more than 1 million children. Think about that. 1 million people now have the right of exit if their situation changes and they want to leave. That said, no victory is final in this area. You're facing some significant challenges over the next year. What are you hoping to see? What are you concerned about?
There's a lot to be concerned about, but I want to tell you one anecdote that I think opens up a real opportunity for us to maximize this. I wanted to get this done. It was my last year. We all remember what happened during COVID. And with the George Floyd tragedy, Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the country. And when I saw what was happening in these other large cities, I called out our National Guard and I put out an 8 p.m. curfew. And I had a woman from the Black Mothers Forum who somehow got to the 9th floor and wanted to see me. And she was upset with what I was doing. She said I was not allowing these kids who were angry to protest. And I said, you know, we're just going to have to agree to disagree on this. Everybody can peacefully protest till 8 p.m., then they can get a good night's sleep and come back tomorrow. We're not going to have what's happening in these other cities happen in the state of Arizona. And she said, I sure wish there was something we could agree on. She had one ask from me that she could bring these kids in, and they wanted to tell me what they were thinking. And I said, we'll do that, Janelle, but no trap doors, no setups, no phones. About a week later, she brought 20 kids to the 9th floor. We sat around a big table. And at the end of it, she said, I didn't like how those kids talked to you, Governor. And I said, well, I'm used to it. I'm the governor, and you sign up for some of that. And she said, no, they talk to me the same way. And somewhere, and it wasn't at their kitchen table, these kids were taught to hate the country and hate our economic system. And she said, I think it's happening in their schools. And I said, Janelle, I've got an idea. Janelle Wood, the leader of the Black Mothers Forum, organized the African American pastors and sat next to the First Lady, Angela Ducey, at my last State of the State, where I said from the podium that 50 years ago, politicians stood in the schoolhouse door and wouldn't let minorities in. Today, union-backed politicians stand in the schoolhouse door and won't let minorities out. These kids are trapped in failing public schools. It's time to set these families free. Janelle Wood led the standing ovation. The black pastors worked the legislature every day, and we passed universal school choice with a 1-vote margin in the House and in the Senate without one Democratic vote. And Janelle Wood and every one of those pastors are Democrats. So the opportunity here is not only to go into any room in this country and make the case on equal opportunity for these parents and these children, but also to go into some of these rooms across the nation and say, want to hear our agenda, want to hear our ideas. So we've passed that, and that is step one. That's most important. You know, I say to people when they're thinking of running for office, there are no silver medals for second place. You can only put your policy in place if you win. But someone referenced one of my favorite quotes earlier when they said, there are no lost causes because there are no gained causes. This is going to continue to be a battle. We believe in freedom. We believe that decisions should start with the individual and the parent. They do not. And we saw that during COVID. I didn't realize the closet authoritarians that we had in this country until COVID came. And the definition of leadership was lockdown, according to the press and the academics. So today, the teachers' unions have been reawakened. I mean, this can make them irrelevant. So they are going to be on the move, trying to point out where there's an abuse or a financial misstep. I think we have to make sure we have accountability, and I believe the accountability is with the parents. Nobody's going to love a child more than their parent. We have to have transparency to how the dollars are being spent, and then fidelity to what we intended this to be. And we also want to see this spread in so many other states. This passed in 2022 in Arizona, came to life this year in 2023. Domino after domino after domino has since fallen. It's now in 10 states across the country, and there's a near nation that we call Texas that is right on the 1-yard line, and Greg Abbott's doing everything that he can. So I think this is there for us. It's also a way, unfortunately, no one would want to have to live through COVID again. But the silver lining in the crisis was K-12 education. My heart and prayers are with the nation of Israel. I've been there 3 times. I took my family there on Christmas vacation in December of 2019. And I think as much as we wish October 7th had never happened, it's exposing what our kids do not know at the university level. Anything of history or values or moral clarity, they have bought into this oppressed and oppressor narrative, this Western civilization is bad and Western colonization has happened. And it's not an informed reading of our history, the West, or what freedom and progress has done for prosperity and quality of life for people all around the world. So I think, again, another opportunity presents itself. We want to continue to expand the ESA program. We also want to make sure that these kids matriculate into a higher education system that, one, will support free speech, and two, give them an equal opportunity in a non-university setting where they can pursue happiness a different way. When I was in high school, there's a class called SHOP. And a lot of people found their purpose in SHOP, and they turned it into a pretty good paycheck. A lot of entrepreneurs came out of that setting. And if you look at what's needed around the country, it's people that can do these skill sets and not go and get a degree that may not be marketable, and it may not be the right thing for them. So I think there's a lot of opportunity with what's happening around the globe, and I'm hoping that my fellow governors and leaders in Congress will take advantage of it.
Governor, since you mentioned college, talk a little bit about Western Governors University. That's something that the state of Arizona is very involved in. A lot of people might be interested who aren't familiar with that.
Well,
picture.
I think being a governor is the best job in politics. Governors are very collegial. They collaborate and communicate, but at the end of the day, they're competitive. They're always looking to outdo their peers in other states. We all have pretty much the same problems to solve. I think the Republican governors look at it from a different worldview than our Democrat governors, but there's a lot of discussion. The governors still meet together. And Western Governors College was something that came out of the Western Governors, which Arizona is a proud member of that coalition, to just bring a innovative look at higher education, to provide something that wasn't necessarily funded through taxpayer dollars alone, and that could have some of the ideas we're talking about today that would promote freedom and positive ideas.
And Arizona State now has a civics program. I can't remember the name of it, that's trying to do some of the work that you're talking about.
The first law that I passed, Avik, was the American Civics Act. And we were the only state in the nation to have it. And it's basically, do we have any new or naturalized Americans in the audience? Yeah. Welcome. Well, she had to pass a test before she could become a citizen. It's a test of 100 questions. Now, I think most of you in this room would not find it a difficult test. But our kids at the grade school and high school level couldn't get a 50%. And this is who's the father of our country, who won the Civil War, how many branches of government are there. This is how much of this has been neglected, because today in so many of our public education outlets, if it's not tested, it's not taught. So today in Arizona, you cannot get a high school diploma if you don't pass that test. And we expanded that to the Sandra Day O'Connor Civic Celebration, where each subject throughout the day has to take one day a year and somehow put civics into the curriculum, and did other things beyond that. I think that was then taken to a college at Arizona State University called the School for Civic and Economic Thought Leadership. And it's basically a freedom school that will have a great books curriculum, have a University of Chicago economics program, and have a real discussion of our founding documents, our Declaration, our Constitution, our Federalist Papers, and how this great miracle and experiment came to life. And we were able to pass that and fund that through our legislature. We were able to open that with the president of the university there, all of our Board of Regents, Senator John Kyle, George Will giving the keynote, Harvey Mansfield from Harvard, and not a protester in sight. And we don't try to dictate the curriculum for our public universities. That's a place where young people and students go to pursue wisdom and knowledge and truth. We just wanted to make sure that that knowledge and truth resided on that campus. And now that school is thriving, and that's expanding to other public universities around the country.
Yeah, it's a model that is being adopted in Texas. There's a Texas, the Civitas Institute, and I can't remember the name of the other school that they have for public leadership, very similar model. I think Florida is doing something similar. So this is one of these really interesting models that Arizona has pioneered that we're now seeing in a lot of places.
And that's part of that healthy competition among governors. When you do go back to the Republican Governors Association and somebody has a win or an idea like that, I remember when I came into office, I'd studied everything Mitch Daniels had done in Indiana and Jeb Bush in Florida, and Rick Perry had an incredible record in 3 terms in Texas, and I wanted to get all of that done in Arizona. And then said to my team, now let's challenge ourselves to be policy entrepreneurs, to be the ones that come up with the new ideas that can be exported. And you see a lot of that across the Governor's Conference.
One of the really interesting things that you passed in Arizona that impressed me and impressed a lot of people at FREOPP, because it's an issue that we followed closely, is your occupational licensing reform. Tell us about what you did there, because that's something that I think a lot of people could learn from.
So it was universal recognition of occupational licensing. And basically what we found in state government is there are a lot of special interests that have co-opted these boards and commissions to protect incumbent interests and to protect special interests. And I already bragged on my team, and as good as they were, it took us about 18 months to figure out how many regulations there are in the state of Arizona.
What were some of the egregious ones?
I want to give you the number first.
Okay.
There's 11,000 regulations once we were able to call them all together. And then we put together a task force and put them online so small businesses could chime in as well. And we basically combed through them to find any that were not necessary to protect public health or public safety. And if they didn't, we wanted to get rid of them. And over the course of 24 months, we were able to eliminate, actually erase from the register 3,000 regulations. It was the equivalent of an $180 million tax cut annually without costing the general fund $1. And if you've ever read Conscience of a Conservative, Barry Goldwater says in the opening foreword that he ran for office not to pass laws, but to repeal laws. And I gave that quote out in my first State of the State, and I said I would like to repeal laws. Now, Ben, I want to talk to you. The legislature doesn't send me a lot of laws to repeal. I tried to veto the ones that were unnecessary, but through executive action, we could repeal regulations. And the point of this matter is, I think we're so blessed and fortunate to inherit what we have as Americans, and we want to make sure that we protect this. I think one of the things the founders could have never anticipated is the proliferation of laws and regulations that are on the books. Somebody asked me, I was stumped, they said, what would you do with a 3rd term? I had never contemplated it. 2 terms is plenty, and we have term limits, which I agree with. But I wish we would put sunsets on our laws. If it's a good law, you can pass it in a future legislature, but we very rarely, if ever, get rid of bad laws. Universal recognition of occupational licensing actually came from a fairness idea. Why, if you are a barber or a CPA or a teacher in Illinois, when you move to Arizona, do you have to go back to school and be recertified? So we kind of played with the left a little bit on this. We said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to trust your government. And if you're certified and in good standing in Illinois or California or anywhere, we're going to recognize that certificate when you come to Arizona, and you can get to work right away. And we were able to pass that, and Arizona's been one of the #1 states in the nation for net in-migration. People were able to come and get to work and begin earning a living, and now that's passed in many other states. We were able to get it done 2 ways. One, the basic fairness of the idea. But it is an abrupt change, and boards and commissions and lobbyists will go crazy. So first we did military spouses. Our average member of the military, God bless them, have to relocate every 18 months. And this is tremendously stressful on a family, you can only imagine. But think about the trailing spouse. And if they are a teacher or someone with a licensure or certificate, they go to this new state and they have to go back to school. They have to spend $14,000 oftentimes if they're a cosmetologist to be recertified. So we started with military spouses, and everybody loves military spouses. And after we had that in place for several years, we said, isn't this really a matter of fairness? Shouldn't every American have the same opportunity? So if you don't have military spouses, I'd rather you just pass it whole hog right now. But we are in the business of persuasion. You have to bring the legislature and the public along, and I think it's places like FREOPP and other people that are thinking on ways that we expand freedom, that come up with these good ideas that actually then make the universal recognition a slam dunk.
It's such a brilliant point, and we were alluding to this earlier in the school choice or the education savings accounts debate, right? It started with, I think, disabled kids, right? Yep. And then it expanded to low-income kids, and then it just kind of built from there. And I mean, it's a really interesting model for all sorts of things, because how you overcome the special interest, this is the issue that we run into in so much of the stuff we do. It's not the far left that's actually the obstacle in a lot of these cases. It's the special interests, the incumbents that have political power that say, no, we are the cosmetologists and you're trying to bring us competition. We're going to fight you on that. And it's just incredible that you're able to overcome that.
Well, I would say we were able to do it several ways. One, we found out that there were government-funded lobbyists. You come into office in Arizona, you inherit a $40 billion budget, combined state and federal, 35,000 state employees, 220 boards and commissions, and 48 agencies that report directly to you. And nobody's asked you one question about any of this on the campaign trail. But we found out that the government was paying for the lobbyists on these boards, and we fired them all. So that was a good start. We gathered all the agency heads together and told them we were going to do things differently. And it was a room not even close to as nice as this. It was very chilly and quiet in there. And I said, I can hear what you guys are thinking. You're thinking, we were here before you, and we'll be here after you. I said, we're going to interview all of you. Everybody's got a uniform, but you've got to get on the new direction. Thankfully, we had one guy, the director of weights and measures. My first month, Arizona hosted the Super Bowl. And the director of weights and measures said, let me tell you what I'm going to do during the Super Bowl. This is 2015. He said, I'm going to sting Uber and Lyft and shut them down. They are in violation of all the regulations that were written for taxi cabs. I said, you obviously didn't pay much attention to the campaign, did you? They served at the pleasure of the governor. We were able to return him to the private sector that afternoon. You would have thought that I had freed all the prisoners, the way the press reacted to this. And then we passed emergency legislation that protected Uber and Lyft during the Super Bowl. Not as a special favor to them. This was an innovation that had been created long after taxi cabs. But this sent a message throughout state government that things were going to change, that you were going to get on board with the program. We were not there to give out special favors. We were there to provide opportunity for all. And we made a lot of good changes inside state government. One of the things I'm most proud of is, you know how much larger the state of Arizona is. You've heard about much of the economic growth, but our state government today is smaller than it was in 2014. And we did it by really only having to publicly fire one individual, the director of weights and measures. In every other situation, we did it through attrition. 24% of the state was eligible for retirement in the first 4 years. So you had to come to the governor's office to make the case to do a hire. If you were in the Department of Public Safety or Child Protective Services, we granted that hire every time. If anything, we wanted you to hire more in those areas. But in all the bureaucracy and administrative state, there was no hires. We let you buy a new computer.
I want to have, amazing. Two questions before we close. One is, you were the governor of a border state where immigration is a controversial issue. You had to deal with a lot of the challenges that border state governors have to deal with. But I know you're a guy who believes in and is passionate about the value of immigration. How did you navigate this issue?
Well, I see it as two separate issues. I actually see it as three separate issues. And I ran on border security. And in 2014, border security wasn't a national issue. I went to see Mitch Daniels and Chris Christie and Scott Walker before I announced, just to pick their brains. And they all asked, what are the biggest issues in Arizona? And I'd say economy, education, and border security. And I still remember Mitch Daniels laughing and saying, border security is not much of an issue in Indiana.
You got to keep those Ohioans in check.
Yeah. More the Michiganders.
That's right.
In 2016, the Trump-Pence administration made it a national issue. And now everyone in the country knows about what's happening at our southern border. They know about this crisis of fentanyl and drug overdoses and really just chaos and lawlessness. But we separated that out as one issue. The other issue, of course, is immigration, and that's done here. That's done in Washington, D.C. That's done in the halls of Congress. And we are in need of, whether you want to call it a merit-based reform or need-based reform. We've got Pizza Huts that can only open 4 days today in the state of Arizona because they don't have staff. This is a wonderful opportunity for new Americans, along with Taiwan Semiconductor needs software engineers. And yet we're educating some of the brightest around the globe and sending them home to compete with us. My first visit as governor upon election was to Mexico City. My first visit upon re-election was to Mexico City. My last visit as governor was to Mexico City. They are our largest trading partner, ×4. It's not even close, and every governor in the country has a number 1 or 2 trading relationship with either Mexico or Canada. So we can secure our border. The previous administration demonstrated that that's possible. And when that happens, there will be an appetite for immigration reform because every small businessman, every service sector in the nation needs new people. And this has been part of the secret sauce of our country and our economy. And then we should also, and the pandemic exposed this as well, we should reshore and repatriate as much business as we possibly can in our supply chain. I think we should continue to have trade with countries around the globe, but when possible, I always want to start with Arizona first, then one of the 49 other states, then Mexico or Canada, Central America or South America, because a more prosperous Western Hemisphere will be a more peaceful Western Hemisphere. That doesn't mean we don't have relationships and allies all around the globe, but that way, come what may, we can at least protect the supply chain and not go through what we went through in the last 2 years. And I think that there's ways we can do that with the USMCA and some of these new trade packages that we really have an opportunity to build on.
Last question for you. Now that you're an ex-governor, you've launched this really interesting new venture called Citizens for Free Enterprise. Tell us a little bit about that.
So Citizens for Free Enterprise is going to be a 50-state organization. It's starting in Arizona. We're going to educate and advocate for free enterprise. If you held up a sign that said capitalism and socialism in nearly any college classroom today across the country, it's a 50-50 proposition. That should really scare people to death around the room. So there's a lot of work to be done there with young people. And then there's a lot that needs to be done. Thank goodness Stacey Abrams wasn't a very good gubernatorial candidate. But I think we should call out what Stacey Abrams did in Georgia. She registered 800,000 new voters in a state that we lost by 11,000. Georgia has 2 Democratic senators. We made some fun of Barack Obama for being a community organizer. Turns out organizing your community is important work at election time. In a state like Arizona, we've been the number one net immigration state in Maricopa County. We lost by 10,000. We've had a state party that in many ways has just gone away. So there's a lot we can do, not only around education and advocacy, but also around registration, resources, and then that turnout material around an evergreen principle like free enterprise. You know, I think when I came into office, and I don't know if Grover Norquist is still here, but he has a pledge that he has new people that come to office. I'm proud that we were able to, in Arizona, we have the lowest flat tax in the nation at 2.5%. And Grover goes all around the country and he gets people to sign this that you won't raise taxes pledge. And in many ways, it's benefited the right dramatically. We are the party that does not raise taxes, that lowers taxes, that allows workers and families to keep more of what they earn. I think we have that same kind of opportunity around free enterprise and freedom, and school choice falls under that umbrella. I know what the work that you're doing here. I want to say to Jonathan Bush and the other leaders in this organization, you are a benefit to governors. Governors are looking for these ideas, and when they find them, they love to present them at the RGA and do a bit of a victory lap. But if we can do that, I think we can actually have blue states at some point when parents are saying, why can my sister-in-law in Arizona have access to her taxpayer dollars to send her child to the school of her choice, and I'm trapped in this school? This is a way to actually have politicians profit from what's the good idea rather than what the special interests are around them. And that's what gives me makes me very hopeful for what's possible in the coming decade.
Governor, we're so grateful to have
Thank
the
you,
opportunity to
Avik.
celebrate
Thank you.
everything you've done and to learn from you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.